On to one of the top international stories that we're covering, and after months of violent street protests against him, Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has finally agreed to step down. He says he's going to do that on Wednesday. He sought time for about 72 hours to actually give in his resignation. But this announcement came moments after Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's private house was set on fire in Sri Lanka. Remember, we saw unprecedented scenes in Sri Lanka on Saturday where a massive crowd actually stormed into the president's palace there. You can see those visuals on your screen there. But protesters actually entered the palace. They jumped into the pool. They were seen inside the palace. The president, of course, had in fact fled ahead of that, the protesters storming into that building. But the speaker, in fact, announced that the president will resign on 13th of July. This comes after the country spiraled into one of its worst economic crises in 7 decades, where the Sri Lankan government ran out of foreign exchange and was struggling to import food, fuel and medicines. In fact, Ranil Wickremesinghe also announced that he's going to tender his resignation and make way for an all-party government. Right, I'm joined by King Ratnam live from Colombo. King, good morning. What is the situation on the streets today?
So the situation in the streets is pretty calm this morning. The violence has indeed stopped and got into control. And I can see people moving around doing their daily routines. But of course, there are not many vehicles on the road simply because, as you can see, there is a huge queue for petrol right behind me, and this queue has been there for 1 week now without petrol. So you can imagine that this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of economic pressure that triggered what transpired yesterday.
Right. King, what I can see on the pictures behind you, there is, of course, long queues outside the fuel stations. As you said, it's been there like for weeks. But in terms of the violence, in terms of the kind of anger we saw on the streets of Lanka yesterday, has that calmed down with the announcement that Gotabaya is finally going to step down on Wednesday?
Well, to a certain extent, but what was demanded yesterday was an immediate resignation, because there was fear of, political games being played up and down, and people, the protesters particularly, didn't want that. They wanted immediate resignation letters to be handed over by the president and the prime minister, and that didn't happen until late night, and that's what I think triggered a lot of anger, because there were statements initially coming out that the PM won't step down, and that triggered a lot of anger. And also, I must, be cautioned when saying this pattern of the day being a peaceful protest and the night being a violent seems to be the pattern, because we saw this on June 9th as well. So there is doubt that there are political forces behind these violent attacks as well.
That's right. We'll, of course, have to wait and see how the day pans out, King. But my last question before we let you go, what exactly is the, update in terms of the authorities? How are they managing the situation? Now, the president has announced that he's going to step down on Wednesday. Ranil Wickremesinghe has said he's going to make way for an all-party government. What's the next step now for Sri Lankan politics, for the people in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a limbo. There is a huge vacuum here. There are so many unanswered questions, as you rightly said. There is so the president has agreed to go. One of the things that the protesters wanted. The prime minister has agreed to go. One of the things that the protesters wanted. And there is very clear and with the protesters that they don't want an all-party government either. What they are calling for is an interim government that will do the needful for a very short time and take us towards another election where the people will come out and vote their mandate.
Right, King, we'll keep a close watch over the situation with you. Thank you so much for joining us live from Colombo there on the latest update in terms of the crisis that we can see on the streets of Sri Lanka, visible over there, the kind of unprecedented scenes that were seen on Saturday. But with Gotabaya Rajapaksa now finally stepping down as the protests in Sri Lanka reached a crescendo.